Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, priority number one for this Miami Hurricanes program over the next couple of weeks in the transfer portal to address this secondary. And one of the visitors they had on campus this weekend, I think, for lack of better terms, would do the trick. Right, Jacksonville State safety Zechariah Poyser, to me, is a difference maker in the back end. One, he's only going to be a redshirt sophomore next year, so he's still getting better as a football player. But man, that 2024 film, extremely impressive. And why I think Zechariah Poyser specifically can really fundamentally change this secondary, he's a do-it-all guy. I mean, you turn on the film, he plays a lot of nickel. He'll play the deep safety spot. He'll play as a box safety, can operate in man coverage, can help support the run, doesn't miss tackles in space. Those are all things that Miami just didn't have enough of those kind of guys in 2024. And it's not to say Zaquan Patterson, can't be that guy in 2025 as a sophomore, but outside of OJ Frederick, how many players in the back end do you trust for the Miami Hurricanes? A guy like Zechariah Poyser, to me, solves a lot of those problems because not only a really good football player, but gives you tremendous versatility. Want to dive into a little bit of the film, talk about some other targets that Miami is going after. Now, before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Miami Hurricane fans. It's been quiet so far. I have a feeling it's not going to stay that way for long for this Miami Hurricanes program. A lot of commitments to break down over the next couple of days. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Dill, without further ado, I know you're a big fan of Zechariah Poyser, so I have to put you on a little bit. You went out and checked him out as well. What biggest takeaways and how can he, kind of add a lot of support to this Miami Hurricane secondary?
I think the one thing I look at is he played a relatively complex defense, it felt like, at Jacksonville State. I mean, they mixed their coverages a fair amount, went from zone, went to a fair amount of man. And again, that felt like an issue at times, is the inability for the Miami Hurricanes secondary in general to seem to grasp that defense essentially and play it well and not give up busted coverages. I mean, Zechariah Poyser, again, a guy I felt like played in a relatively complex scheme at Jacksonville State and did a good job with it. And the fact that, as you said, he has the skill set to play a lot of different roles, I think allowed that Jacksonville State team to kind of be a little bit.
And that versatility. So not only doing a lot of different things from a schematic standpoint, but he seemed to be the ultimate chess piece. You take a look at the snap counts. I mean, he played over 800 snaps for Jacksonville State on the defensive side of the football in 2024 right away. Like, that's telling me this coaching staff like this kid. He didn't really come off the football field. 197 as a box safety, 415 as a nickel, over 200 as a deep safety, did everything. And you look at Miami and kind of who they had in the back end, you didn't have a lot of versatile pieces. I mean, you look at a guy like Jaden Harris or Michelle Powell really struggled to tackle in space. At times, Zaquan Patterson struggled to hold up in man coverage. They didn't have guys that could do everything Lance Guidry wanted. Now, I am not expunging Lance Guidry because I thought from a defensive coordinator standpoint, that simply was not good enough. And even if you don't have the guys, you got to figure out something to be competitive, and he didn't. But the personnel was clearly lacking in the Miami Hurricanes back end. Now, you look at what I love about Zechariah Poyser. Let's start with the basics, like tackling. And this is a guy that can come up and tackle and doesn't miss too many tackles. Was fourth on the team, I believe, for Jacksonville State in tackles. Only missed 13%. To kind of put that in perspective with Miami Hurricane members of this back-end defense, Jaden Harris, 27% missed tackle. Michelle Powell, 25% missed tackle. Even Zaquan Patterson was up there at 20%. Finding guys that can tackle in space and limit the big plays is a priority. Zechariah Poyser can do that. Then, Dill, you get into the film, he's a do-it-all guy. I mean, I love what he can do as a nickel corner. I mean, you take a look at him right up here. He's a guy that's comfortable in man coverage. And essentially, we're giving that cover one look where we got one safety deep. We're bringing the rest of pressure. Zechariah Poyser's got to hold up. It's 3rd and 5. You know the ball's coming out quick. Getting his head around, breaking on the football. I mean, we didn't have guys that could hold up in man coverage like Zechariah Poyser can. And so I think that's where it starts because, Dill, you go back to a lot of this Miami Hurricane secondary in 2024 when they went to a lot of cover one or even at times cover zero, And they asked, in that case, you asked your safeties to hold up in man coverage. They just didn't have the guys to do it.
And that's becoming just so important. I feel like safeties who can't play, there felt like a time
Agreed.
maybe 15, 20 years ago where you could kind of be a safety and not have to do a whole lot of man coverage and it
Yep.
wouldn't become painfully obvious necessarily in games. I don't think that's really the case anymore. Like safeties who can't cover guys, offensive coordinators can get their matchups on those guys and really beat them over the head kind of with it. You need to be able to cover. And you
Yeah.
look at Zechariah Poyser again. I still think probably most comfortable in the deep safety role, given his range, given some of those skill sets he has. But a guy who's certainly, and that's probably part of his game that's still probably developing to an extent, is that underneath coverage and showing off that short area quickness.
Yep.
But a guy who certainly isn't a liability in that area. And again,
No.
only a young player who hopefully can get better in that area.
He's got 3 years of eligibility. I mean, this was his first year playing like real football at Division I level, redshirted in 2023. Like there's what's the difference between Zechariah Poyser and Michelle Powell? Michelle Powell coming over as a 6-year senior. Like you kind of knew what you were getting. You weren't getting a ton of upside in it, at the time. And I still did like the move because Miami was so young in the back end, but you knew you weren't going to get an all conference guy. Like Zechariah Poyser is a guy that, hey, we know can play good football, might be able to play great football over the next couple of years. Dill, in terms of coverage,
Because he's just like, I mean, that's a big nickel corner. I mean, you look at the 6'2", probably getting over 200 pounds by now in his career.
he looks it.
That's a big corner or nickel cornerback. So again, like obviously, I think right now it feels like he's most comfortable kind of playing in space and playing downhill, especially, or playing with some range. But a guy who certainly has that skill set that I think he can develop.
Shout out to Rich Rod. I was like watching a lot of Jackson State games, kind of prepping this kid. No, it's just big and fast, man. Like you can tell Rich Rod was just like, give me the big and fast players. They're not necessarily some of the greatest football players at times, but it's just a big and fast defense, and that's kind of what you got to do. And obviously, Jacksonville State had a lot of success. Faced 68 targets. They battle tested, only gave up 32 catches, like 47% completion percentage when targeted is a damn good number for a safety / nickel. Dill, you like what he does in the back end. You said it best. I mean, you kind of get a little bit of a Hail Mary attempt here, but I think it still just shows Zechariah Poyser how comfortable he is. Hey, when that football is in the air, we're going to show range. We're going to show ball skills. So comfortable going up and making plays. And I get that's kind of a gimme there, but it does show you when I saw this, I was like, oh, that's number 18 again. Like just so comfortable playing the back end. You said it best. Keep your eyes on the quarterback. When that football is in the air, show that range, go make a play on the football. Certainly can do that. And then Dill, lastly, and this is what I'm most excited about because I think he can improve on this too because he's 6'2" frame. $190, you said it looks a little bit over 200 pounds. He can get active running the alley and stopping the run, which was a massive problem. Tackling from the safeties in terms of taking angles and actually bringing ball carriers to the ground was such a problem for Miami in 2024. Take a look at Zechariah Poyser up here. I mean, we're running the alley. We're working through traffic, which is another thing the safeties stunk at. And we're being physical at the point of attack. That's about as good as it gets from Zechariah Poyser. So I look at it and say, not only a really good football player that's still young and developing, but he's a do-it-all guy. And you're trying to completely revamp this Miami Hurricane secondary. There's not a better guy to do it than Zechariah Poyser, who is just an absolute chess piece in the back end for this defense.
I mean, at the end of the day, one thing you almost like probably should emphasize is that he's just a tackler. I mean, you look at whether he's doing in the box, whether he's out in space, like this guy tackles really consistently. And a lot of that is because he is that type of like explosive athlete. So he closes space quickly. He gets guys to the ground. Again, those things that you look at from Miami, it's like their inability to tackle on underneath routes was wildly frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, again, you need better athletes, more explosive athletes, and guys who can get guys to the ground in space. And Zechariah Poyser, he's that guy.
Yeah, it's hard. Like sometimes you take it for granted, but Miami Hurricane fans are certainly not in 2025. Like tackling is going to be important. I'm surprised this kid wasn't more heavily recruited out of high school because I'm like looking at him. And it's like this is not a G5 body that's just playing good football. Like that's a power 4 body that maybe he wasn't the best football player coming out of high school, but I'm surprised some power 4 schools didn't take a chance on this kid because he looks the part from a size speed standpoint. Now, that's not the only guys Miami's really kicking around. Dill, CJ Daniels, a guy we loved last year. He's in the portal again. Miami went after C.J. Daniels quite hard 12 months ago when he hit there. I believe it was in the spring, so 8 months ago when he hit the portal. I'll look at C.J. Daniels. You may be trying, and I don't think it's a priority. And Dale, this is a discussion we can have where, look, if you're Miami, I look at the wide receiver and say, I get it. You're losing Restrepo, who is an absolute dude. You're losing Jacoby George, but I think Isaiah Horton's coming back. You got some really young guys in JoJo Trader, Nycar, who I think are going to be really good football players. Maybe you want to grab one veteran wide receiver to kind of bring along the young pups. But I don't think this is a position where I get it's flashy and I get there's a lot of good football players in it. But I don't know if this is a position where I'm getting desperate to find Miami to add in the transfer portal.
No, I would certainly think they'd be well spent, or their time would be better spent on other spots. Because you said it, like, just because they are losing some good receivers, like that has been a position they've recruited well. They've kept those guys in the program pretty effectively. So again, you have enough proven potential, I think, with guys like Horton, and then you look at those young guys. Like those guys have to get on the field soon because otherwise you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
You might as well just make it happen because I think they're talented enough to make a lot of.
Yeah, and Samuel Brown, if Sam Brown, who I don't know if he decided to stay or not, I should look into that. But I know he's got another year. Like if he stays, I'm looking at it and saying, you look at the transfer portal and it's kind of like time and resources. Like where do you want to use your time and resources recruiting positions? For me, the wide receiver position is a little bit lower on the totem pole, and guys on the defense, specifically in the back end, that's where I'm putting my resources in trying to build this team up. Last guy I want to talk about, I know one of your personal favorites, Mekhi Bayor. Dill, I love the young backers for Miami. Like I think Adarius Hayes is going to be a dude. I think Bobby Pruitt's going to be a dude. Obviously, Kiko just was not the guy we remember in 2023. So maybe you want to add a veteran backer that's played a lot, which is Mekhi Bayor, who I think is really good in space too, which I think is certainly worth mentioning. Only missed 11% of his tackles. I like the young pups, but I also don't hate adding a veteran cat like Mekhi Bayor to this room.
Now, this feels like a position that it's just going to be simply hard to attract guys to because of what you said.
So
like
good,
that's deep. They're very young. They're very talented in that linebacker room. Again, like I'd certainly take him. I do think that's me a hard spot for Miami to attract that type of guy because Mekhi Bayor is a really good player, but he's not an immediate starter for Miami. Like he certainly would have to go battle, and I don't know that he beats out guys like Pruitt or some of those younger guys.
Bobby Pruitt, man, watch out for that kid. We knew he needed just maybe 1 year to put on some weight, but he doesn't lack any physicality.
And you say similar things about like guys like Aguirre, like they're really, really good with those young linebackers. I think Chase Smith showed some really good things. So again, I would not take Mekhi Bayor because I do think he's kind of an underrated guy. But frankly, if I'm Mekhi Bayor, there's probably greener pastures in terms of like immediate access to the field. Because
we'll see. Like I think at the end of the day, Miami has been kicking or like Zechariah Poyser. I don't think we're making any groundbreaking analysis. Like Georgia's after him, Auburn's after him, Florida's after him. There are a lot of really good football teams that want him. I'd rather go head to head with those guys for a guy that I think can fundamentally change my secondary. And it's not like I'm not going to be fired up if C.J. Daniels commits to Miami. Like the commitment switch is coming on. We're talking about it, but you got to think about you want to use your resources in the portal to best fill in the cracks of your roster. I think you've identified a massive crack in your roster, and that's the back end. Go make sure it's filled to go in 2025. And then
I don't expect a big class from Miami in the portal just because, again, you've kept a pretty well in certain spots. So, yeah, I could see them bringing a couple guys in the secondary, but I just look at the size of the class they've recruited out of high school, the quality of guy they've recruited. I think they've put together a really good kind of pipeline. I don't think they need like 20 plus guys in the portal. I look like they get a lot of good young players on this team.
Yeah, that could be fair. We'll see. I it's more just like I think Mario Cristobal, when it comes to talent acquisition, it's never enough with him. And so he's gonna try to make this roster better. We'll see how it plays out. We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.